2, 1, boom. And we are live. I am joined by John Morgan from MMA Junkie, MMA Road Show. How are you doing today?
I'm good, man. I'm good. It's busy times in MMA as always, but that's a good thing, man.
Yeah, I'm about to say you're a very busy individual right now. You got a lot of events back to back to back. How's that been?
It's good, man. It's kind of funny. Like, for most of my career, it's been about traveling all around the country and all around the world to cover events, and now they're right here in my backyard, which is nice. You know what I mean? It's every single week, so it's pretty much a relentless grind. But man, I'm able to sleep in my own bed at night, which is nice, man. I actually get to enjoy my house a little bit, so it's good, man. I'm happy to be working. This has been a crazy time, so the fact that MMA has been steady, man, that's a blessing. Can't hate on it.
Right, and you said you had something coming up with CM Punk on CS commentary with CM Punk. Talk about that.
Yeah. Actually, Wednesday night, I'm leaving to head out to Philadelphia Cage Fury Fighting Championships on the UFC Fight Pass. So we've got back-to-back events on Thursday and Friday from Philadelphia. So, I won't be actually covering the UFC event this weekend. Mike Bond is actually coming in to help me out and cover for me. So I'll be stepping away from the UFC for a week, but not stepping away from MMA. Just doing another gig, man. It's fun. I enjoy the commentary side of it. I really I enjoy calling fights, and I enjoy kind of seeing that next level, like finding those kind of that next crew of people that are coming in. You look at a guy like Sean Brady this past weekend. He came through CFFC. Aljamain Sterling actually came through CFFC at one point. Paul Felder. You know what I mean? So it's kind of cool to see, guys like that are making their way up. So, enjoy doing that. And actually, it kind of means on Saturday night, I actually just get to watch fights, man. I'll just be sitting on the couch watching TV like anybody else.
That's awesome. I did commentary for Combat Night and for Undisputed Promotions, boxing and MMA, both professional and amateur. I enjoyed it so much, but I don't think people understand the layers behind it. It's challenging. It has a lot of challenging moments because there's certain things when you watch it that you don't think you have to say, but when you're talking, you're trying to paint a picture for the people at home watching. Is that something that you kind of picked up naturally? Is it something that you're getting better at over time?
I hope so. Yeah, I hope I'm getting better over time at it. I enjoyed it. Something I've done for a long time. Been doing like, for instance, Tough Enough here in Las Vegas, which is an amateur organization. I actually got to call some of Ronda Rousey's amateur fights before she turned pro. And there's been a number of other fighters that have made it to the UFC. But yeah, no, I enjoy it. It's a whole different situation. It's kind of funny. You really do gain respect for those people out there. The commentators that you didn't really understand, necessarily all the ins and outs of their jobs, especially as you get to the higher level productions, where you've got ad reads you've got to work in, or you've got spots that have to be worked in. So you're kind of balancing all these things on top of just talking about fights and talking about the athletes and that sort of thing. So, it's a lot of work. In fact, man, I'm going to spend most of the next couple of days just doing research, getting my notes together on all these fighters. Even though they're early in their career, you want to be able to present whatever you can, and let people know what they can expect to see and what's on the line for these fighters and that sort of thing. So it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun, man. The people at CFFC are awesome, and man, I love working with CM Punk. He's a really, really good dude. I know he catches some flack sometimes for his MMA career, but man, the guy is absolutely passionate about the sport, and he's a fun guy to work with. Right.
And it makes you really appreciate like Joe Rogan, and Daniel Cormier made such an amazing transition. Like, he's just a natural at it. John Anik. CM Punk is such a well-spoken individual. Like you said, I know there's so many things to think about when you think of the name CM Punk. But what is it like working with him? As like you said, like, a lot of people don't know that side of him.
No, he's a great guy to work with. It's really funny. I always joke, but when he signed with the UFC, I wasn't really a big pro wrestling fan. I was when I was a little kid. That's kind of what got me started in combat sports. But then I didn't follow it for years and years and years. So I didn't know anything about him, man. The guy signed with the UFC, and I was on his Wikipedia page, like, trying to find facts just so I could fill out the story that I was writing for MMA Junkie. I was like, I don't know, man. This dude's a wrestler. That's all I know. Right. So it's funny. I don't know that aspect of his career, but man, I love working with him, man. He like I said, he's a pretty humble guy, and he understands that his MMA career didn't go so great, but he was appreciative to get the opportunity, man. He was very thankful to the UFC that they gave him that chance, and he was happy that he basically was able to chase a dream, and he still trains every single day, man. He puts in training every day. He's with the guys, Rufus Sport, man, that crew. He still puts in the work. He understands he'll never fight again. That's not really in his dreams anymore, but he still just loves the sport that much that he enjoys training, he enjoys staying on top of it, and he's a fun guy to work with, man. He really is.
And anyone to just step foot in the octagon has my respect. Like, it's so easy for media members or fans to be like, oh, come on, he's not even that good. But just the courage to step inside the octagon against someone who's trying to take your head off with everybody watching. Like you said, WWE to UFC, it's night and day difference. These people are actually really going to hurt you. And so he automatically got my respect for just doing that.
Yeah, well, and the thing is, too, the way he approached it, which is one reason I always liked covering his fighting career. Even though I didn't know anything about his pro wrestling career, like I liked him from day one because from the very beginning, he said, look, I don't know if I'm going to be any good at this. You know what I mean? I just want to do it. And because, I have a certain level of fame, the UFC is willing to let me do it at the highest level. And he's like, if I had the opportunity to try this, either it's some regional show, where maybe, people see it, people don't, I get, it's in a ballroom somewhere. He's like, or I get to try it in the UFC at the very highest level of the sport with the biggest stage possible, the bright lights, everything. I want to do that. You know what I mean? And if I get the opportunity to do that, why wouldn't I take it? And so I always thought that was great. He never came in and said, I'm the greatest mixed martial artist the world has ever seen, and I'm going to take this sport by storm. Nah, he just said, look, I may suck at this, but I'm going to try it. And,
right.
and how can you not respect him for that,
Right. And the greatest people really in any industry take risks, and he did that. I want to ask you this. So one thing I noticed, Israel Adesanya just lost. And I know a lot of people are, come on now, see, he's never going to be this and that. It's like, let's just pump the brakes. One thing that I realized is, all right, so we have Max Holloway, TJ Dillashaw, and now we have Israel Adesanya. Are people, I may be missing a few, but I think that's pretty much the gist of it. People who attempted to win another divisional belt, another weight class belt, and they weren't successful at it, which is okay. They're taking a risk. But have you noticed they kind of have the momentum going into the fight? Why is that? Is it because of the thrill of them achieving two weight class divisions? What makes it where they're not, well, they were the favorite, but what adds that extra oomph to their coverage when they attempt that?
I think it's a couple of things. I mean, number one, if you're in a position to do that, it means that you've done pretty well where you're at. You know what I mean? It's not like everybody gets to just go, hey, I'm going to go challenge for a second belt. You got to win the first belt first. You know what I mean? And you got to prove that you're somebody that's worth it. And you got to prove that you're marketable. And so, normally the people that you're doing this, that are taking these opportunities are people that have already proved themselves as marketable commodities. But I think people respect the attempts at history. You know what I mean? The fact that you're doing something out of the ordinary, you are stepping out of what we've seen before, and you're trying to accomplish something that, yes, it's been done before, but it hasn't been done very often. It's not commonplace by any stretch of the imagination. So, I think, that's kind of fascinating when you start doing that, because it really opens up all the possibilities. No longer are you just looking at, well, let's see who's around you in the rankings. Let's see those names that are out there. No, now you're opening up the possibilities. I mean, think about this. Before Israel Adesanya, lost his fight, we're talking about could he go up to heavyweight and fight Jon Jones and do all these things? I mean, it's crazy when you think about it, but the fact that we're even able to have those conversations is pretty exciting. I think that's why people get pumped up about it, because it really kind of opens the doors to all possibilities.
Right. Now, obviously, he can easily come back down to middleweight and dominate. But let me ask you this. Has these super fights, has the jump to multiple divisions taken away the value of defending your belt? Like, if you're a champion, it's a lot more appealing to go and get something you haven't gotten than defending what you already have.
Yeah, unfortunately, I do think that's kind of a downside of the situation that we're in now. Right? This started with the Conor McGregor, champ status, and everybody wanted to jump on top of it. And I do, unfortunately, think I was one of those guys that always felt, when people talk about George St. Pierre or Anderson Silva, and they would say, oh, well, you're not really great unless you go do something else. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. If you're a person that has, basically selected a weight class that is ideal for your body, and you have made it so that you can hit that weight limit every single time, and every single person that steps on the stage at that same weight falls short of you. I mean, that's greatness. You know what I mean? That's not extended dominance. To me, I've always favored, to be honest with you, extended dominance over a weight class. You know what I mean? There's something to be said for just clearing out an entire division where nobody in that division can touch you. That, to me, is pound for pound greatness. When people say, oh, well, if you're going to be a pound for pound great, you have to move to another weight class. I've just never bought into that. And unfortunately, and maybe these setbacks, you mentioned a handful of setbacks. Maybe this will kind of stem the tide a little bit and we can get back to it. I don't think you necessarily have to be a champ, a 2-division champion to prove that you're great. What I think is you need extended dominance, and you need to just, dominate every single person in that division, wipe out the slate. You're number one in the division, 2 through 10 have all been vanquished. That to me is dominance.
And I agree. And now, obviously, recently, Jon Jones moved up, but Jon Jones did that. George St. Pierre did that. Anderson Silva did that. Khabib Nurmagomedov did that. To me, to your point, I think longevity is more impressive. But, for example, are we going to look at Anderson Silva's career and Khabib differently now if Khabib never returns and he doesn't win that second belt? Is that a blemish on their career?
No, I don't. Not to me. I mean, and I don't think so. I mean, if you're going to look at Anderson Silva's career and Khabib Nurmagomedov's career, the big difference there is what happened late in their career, right? I mean, Anderson Silva had all the losses late. So if you look at any blemishes, it's going to be the fact that he probably hung around a little bit too long. That's an entire another discussion to have as well, right? Because that later stage of the career is when you're making the most money. You know what I mean? That's when you've maximized your potential. You've earned contract after contract after contract, and now maybe you're on the decline, but you still have that high guaranteed salary, and so you want to put as much money in the bank as you can for your family. So that's kind of a disappointing / frustrating discussion to have. Like when you talk about Anderson Silva, man, when you talk about prime era Anderson Silva, and I think there's a group of MMA fans that have probably never really seen that, kind of newer to the sport. All they saw was the tail end of Anderson Silva, and I'm sure they go, man, why is this guy spoken about with such reverence? Like, I don't think he's that good. But if you go back and watch when he was in his prime, he was absolutely unbelievable. So that's a discussion to have too. Obviously guys like George St. Pierre, guys like Khabib Nurmagomedov that left the sport on top. Of course, we talk about them as all-time greats, but Anderson Silva needs to be in that discussion as well. It's just you kind of have to understand that there was a point where he started to tail off, and unfortunately, he kept chasing it.
The way Khabib dominates his opponents, Anderson Silva did on the feet. And that's what made it like, whoa. Like, he just seemed in his peak, like you said, he stayed around too long. But at his peak, it's like, I don't think anyone could beat him because every fight starts standing. And if he's on the feet, he's going to beat you. If you're Jon Jones, right? Jon Jones went to Twitter talking about the Iz fight. What does he take away from this? Because now he's attempting to move up in weight. He's trying to become a heavyweight champion. Do you think Jon Jones is sitting there taking anything away from this? Anything to learn from what happened?
Well, knowing Jon Jones, all he's taking away is, see, I told you. You know what I mean? I knew I was a badass, and this guy ain't nothing. That's what he's taking away. But no, man, you look at Jon Jones move to heavyweight, and he's another one, too, that, people were pressuring him to move to heavyweight forever. And I was kind of always of the mind that, wait, man, why does he have to do that? The guy, you think about the dominance that Jon Jones has had. We're talking about a decade on top of the sport, beating, the absolute legends of the sport. I mean, this guy has beaten everybody. He has cleaned out the division. I never felt a need for him to move to heavyweight. However, it is exciting that he's doing it, but what you see is he's doing it in such a way that he understands, like, I can't go into the heavyweight division with a light heavyweight body. I'm going to go ahead and build muscle and build strength and change my entire physique and then change my game. So he's making all the adjustments necessary. I don't know that, I mean, look, Israel Adesanya did not get dominated the other night. I mean, he could have won that fight. A couple little changes here and there, he could have won that fight. But he approached it a little different. I mean, he said from the beginning, right, I'm not going to do anything different. I'm just going to go to light heavyweight with my middleweight body, and I think I can be successful there. And he maybe could have, but, would a little bit of a muscle change or, would have helped maybe, I mean, a little more strength, a little more power, who knows. But I think, they're doing things in an entirely different way. So while there are certain things I think that Jon Jones can take away from what happened to Israel Adesanya, I really think he's doing kind of almost an entire different mission if you think of it that way.
Right. Now, I think Stipe is arguably the greatest heavyweight of all time, but I think in a weird way he's one of the most underappreciated, underrated fighters of all time. In a weird way, I think Stipe is a better match for Jon Jones than Ngannou. Am I crazy for saying that?
Yeah, it's all about matchups, right? I mean, it's the old cliche that styles make fights, but it's a cliche because it's true. You know what I mean? And so it's all about how things play out. And Stipe, he's definitely underappreciated. And there's a number of reasons for that, I think. But I do think that while he is a great boxer, he is a great striker, and every heavyweight has knockout power. He doesn't have that type of freakish, one touch, no matter what the angle is, no matter how it lands, is going to put you out. So, and he likes to rely on wrestling a little bit more. He'll work the clinch game a little bit more. All things I think would probably play into Jon Jones' favor because he's awfully good in those positions as well. So, yeah, I mean, if you're talking about who's going to, I mean, here's the weird thing about Francis Ngannou is if you look at just overall skills, I mean, if you're talking about literally breaking down pound for pound, who's the better mixed martial artist, it's Jon Jones. I mean, Jon Jones has a much more well-rounded repertoire of skills. However, Francis Ngannou has that scary one-touch power, and that could easily put Jon Jones out. So, yeah, if I was looking for A safer matchup, I'd probably say Jon Jones against Stipe he'd probably be a little more comfortable in that matchup, even though he'd probably be facing a better fighter overall. It's just weird, man. Francis Ngannou is like kind of like a Derek Lewis, kind of like a it's just and I don't want to compare the two because they are obviously different in how they approach their games, but they could be losing a fight for 24 minutes and 50 seconds and still win, right? Because one shot can change everything.
Now, let's break down the Stipe-Ngannou fight. Obviously, they fought once. Stipe wins. The second time, what adjustments are you expecting to see Ngannou make that he didn't make necessarily the first time?
Yeah, I think there's a number of adjustments that are going to be different. I mean, number one, he's been working on rounding out his game. He has been working on his wrestling and understanding that those are positions that people are going to put him in throughout his career. I also think there's a different mental approach as well. I think Francis Ngannou was in a different headspace back at that time. I think if I'm being honest, I think he kind of bought into his own hype a little bit. I think he thought, hey, I am this wrecking ball that can't be touched and can't be stopped. And then, I think he had to realize, like, oh, wait a minute, there's some highly skilled individuals out there. So, I think he's approaching everything a little bit different. I still think it's a tough matchup for him, man. I mean, I still think there's a real chance we see, not necessarily a complete repeat, but we see Stipe take advantage of the same sort of positions and advantages that he had. So it's still tough. It's still a tough test for Francis Ngannou, but I think he's going to be better prepared both physically and mentally this time around.
Right. Now, if Stipe wins, he's beaten the Junior Dos Santos, the Alistair Overeems, he's beaten the Verdums, he's beaten DC twice, and now if he beats Ngannou, he beats Ngannou twice. Does he solidify himself? I've always said Prime Kane, to me, is the most impressive heavyweight of all time. You have to mention Fedor, but he always had they never fought in the UFC kind of stigma over his head. If Stipe wins, does this kind of solidify him as the GOAT of heavyweights, or at least the GOAT of the UFC heavyweight division?
Well, I think that's the easier case to make, right? Is the GOAT of the UFC's heavyweight division. I think that's the easier one. And as you said, it kind of leans back to what we were talking about earlier is dominance over time, right? I agree with you. Cain Velasquez was incredible, man. This guy was primed to be the greatest ever, but injuries cost him, right? I mean, he didn't get the number of fights and the number of defenses and all those things that you would expect. It's a weird argument to have because, like, the UFC, heavyweight title defense record is so low. We've never had somebody defend it 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times in a row. It's never happened, right? It just changes hands, and that's partly the nature of the heavyweight division. But yeah, that's it. One touch. Everybody has the ability to end fights. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter who you are. So, look, I do think that Stipe probably is the greatest UFC heavyweight of all time. I don't think that's even necessarily a difficult argument to make because, as I said, it's about accomplishments. You talk about Cain Velasquez's talent, but it's kind of, I don't want to say it's unrecognized potential because he did a lot of great things. But if you're talking about, comparing total resumes, I think you lean towards Stipe. But yeah, as you said, Fedor Emelianenko, to me, I still think the greatest heavyweight of all time. Again, there's going to be an era of fighters, or of fans, I should say, that never saw him fighting in his prime, that have only seen this kind of, post-career era, this mid-40s Fedor Emelianenko, which is still cool. I mean, the guy still has, like, this aura about him, and it's still something cool. But, man, when you go back to Pride, man, when it's probably hard for a lot of people to believe. I mean, there was a time when Pride was a bigger organization than the UFC. It was the dominant organization in the world, and he was dominating that. So yeah, to me, I understand there's a caveat that he didn't fight in the UFC, but he was fighting in Pride when their heavyweight division was even better, to be honest with you. So to me, he's still the greatest of all time in the heavyweight division. But I think Stipe is the best UFC heavyweight of all time.
I was about to say, because Pride was known for their heavyweight division, and then it was no drug testing. So you're fighting Heath Herring, Nogueira, Crow Cop. He even fought Bob Sapp. Like, he's fighting just monsters with no testing, and just dominated them. Talk about someone who looked like unbeatable. Like, he would go in there nonchalantly, just straight face, and just beat him. It would be submission. It'd be knockout one time. He was just unbeatable. It was like him and Vanderlei just ruled Pride.
It was, man. It was a completely different era. I feel bad for anybody that wasn't watching back then because you missed, this kind of whole era that was something special that I don't think will be recreated again. But it was definitely a special time in the sport.
Let me ask you about this. So I have a broader question I'm going to save after this topic, and it's Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier, right? So the first time Conor knocks him out, the second time completely different fight. Do you believe a trilogy makes sense or needs to happen? Is it Charles Oliveira should be getting it? What are your thoughts on that whole situation going on in that lightweight division?
Needs to happen is probably a little strong to me. To be honest with you, I'd like to see Dustin Poirier fighting for the undisputed UFC lightweight title. You know what I mean? I really would. I feel like that would be such an accomplishment in his career, and I think he would. He said he wants to get to that, and I think that would be a huge moment for him. But should it happen? Will it? I mean, it looks like it's gonna happen.
Right.
Is there interest in it? Of course, man. People want to see the trilogy. People want to see these two guys fight again, and people want to see Conor McGregor compete again. So, I'm not opposed to it, but it's not something that, like, if it never happened, I would feel like, oh, we have really been robbed of this opportunity, and how did we never see that fight? You know what I mean? I would be okay with it. But I'm happy for Dustin. It's an opportunity for him to go in and make a lot of money, man. And at the end of the day, that's what this is about, right? It's about these athletes putting as much money in the bank as they can, because they can only do this for so long, man. This is not a career. It's been said. I think sometimes it gets misinterpreted. The matchmakers, I think Joe Silva is the one that originally started saying it, but it's stayed in the UFC culture that athletes need to understand that fighting is an opportunity. It's not a career. Meaning that you have a very short window of time to compete in the sport. So make sure you maximize your earning potential while you do, because there is no 401k. You can't do this until you're 60 years old. You know what I mean? So honestly, in my heart, I wish Dustin Poirier was fighting for the UFC undisputed lightweight title, because I believe that the effort that he's put into the sport, the commitment he's had, I'd love for him to see that. You know what I mean? To have that opportunity, to know that when he walks away one day, that he's he had a chance to be a champion. But man, if the bigger paycheck is fighting Conor McGregor, then young man, go get that money. You know what I mean? That's what you're in it to do, is to take care of your family.
What's so impressive with Dustin, because your point is so valid, is that this isn't a career. It's more of an opportunity. And the fact that he's had so many different layers to his career, his longevity has been incredible. You don't ever really see someone kind of be down in the dumps and then completely transform their game, move up a weight division, and then be better than they've ever been when they were younger. Now, this is not for a belt if they were to have a trilogy, right?
Correct. Well, they haven't said it would be. Look, the UFC can do whatever they want.
Right.
I think even Dana White would have a hard time selling that one. You know what I mean? Conor McGregor, no disrespect to Conor McGregor, an absolute superstar. He does not deserve to be fighting for a lightweight title right now.
Okay, now what changes in the third fight? Right, the first fight, if you go back and watch it, obviously they're younger. Obviously it's a different weight division. Conor had his typical karate long stance, that balance, light on his feet, the timing. The second time they fight, he's his boxing stance is very boxing oriented, and that's obviously why his leg got chopped up. What adjustments do you think he makes in the third fight? Do we see that Conor with the bounce, or do we see that front leg heavy boxing stance again?
Yeah, I think he's got to get away from that boxing stance. I think the people around him, kind of realize that afterwards. And some of the conversations I've heard afterwards, I think they realized that, that was a bit of a tactical mistake. So I think they definitely make those adjustments. It's going to be interesting to see. I mean, Conor McGregor, right, has been in this situation before, right, where he lost and he got the immediate rematch and he made the adjustments and was able to prove victorious. But it is going to take some changes. I don't think there'll be nearly as much, adjustments or differences in both fighters. Obviously the first time was years and years apart. I mean, you're almost talking about two different athletes at that point. This, I think, the fact that it's going to happen so quickly together, I think both are going to be very familiar with each other. I think Conor will be better prepared just from the fact that he has had a fight, right? You know what I mean? It's not that he's had this lengthy layoff, and I think that's a good thing for him. He's got the time. He's got the, you can't practice at full game speed in mixed martial arts. So I think, he'll be better prepared. And I think that's the adjustments is going to have to be in that stance and that movement, the preparation for the low kicks, and understanding that, yes, you hit hard, but you can't go in there thinking this is a boxing match because you're facing a well-rounded, complete mixed martial artist on the other side of the cage.
Now, Conor did rock him. Conor did have him hurt. He did have success, but does it worry you that he hit him with his best shots, clean on the button, and it didn't put him away like it did the first fight? Is that something to be worried about?
No. I mean, not if you're backing Conor McGregor, no, because he did rock him. And Dustin said afterwards, he's like, dude, that dude hits hard, man. That dude, he had me flash. So, a couple more shots, and I think he can put anybody out. I mean, Conor McGregor. Okay. Look, the power is real. He does have the ability to knock anybody out in division. So, maybe it's not Francis Ngannou-esque one hitter quitter. You know what I mean? You got to lay a couple of them together. But he had Dustin stunned. You could see it. Dustin just responded better. At 155 pounds, he's
Bigger.
able to take a shot a lot better than he could at 145 when he was completely depleting himself to make weight. So, but I still think that Conor McGregor has the power to knock out anybody. So, the power is still there.
My last question when it comes to breaking down this fight is, so do you believe in ring rust? Because I know Dominic Cruz is huge on, he doesn't believe in ring rust. So you do believe that played a huge part in what happened with Conor and Dustin?
I do. I mean,
Okay.
I like Dominic Cruz a lot, man. But I think sometimes that's something he tells himself because he's had to deal with it so often. You know what I mean? I think he just tells himself that it doesn't exist. And it's not to say that, oh, well, if you've had a layoff, you can't win because it's just impossible. No, you can. But everybody you talk to, whether they'll say it on camera or off, will tell you, man, the timing, the speed, it's just all a little bit different when you get in there on fight night. You can spar as much as you want. You can train as much as you want. You can simulate to a degree, but you can't replicate exactly what happens on fight night unless it's fight night. And so the more that you're in there, the more frequently that you're in there, it definitely has an impact on your timing.
Okay, so here's my last question. The UFC is a star-driven sport, right? It's a star-driven business. Aside from Amanda Nunes, we have Jon Jones, who's kind of on hold right now. Conor just lost. Israel Adesanya just lost. And Khabib just retired. Who's the face of the UFC right now? Is there any?
That's a good question. Is there a face of the UFC right now? I don't know that there's one athlete among the other, right? Because you're right. Those people have walked away. So I don't know that there's one person right now that I would look at and say the face of the UFC. I would say, if Max Holloway can find a way to get a title back, man, he's gained a lot of steam, a lot of momentum as of late. I mean, to be honest with you, I'd probably say Conor McGregor is the face of the UFC right now. Even though he's coming off losses, I mean, he's the biggest star in the history of the sport. He still remains a global superstar. I think he needs to win. I mean, the great thing about mixed martial arts is that you can lose and still move forward, but you can't lose forever. You do got to pick up some victories, and I think a win is important for him. But yeah, I mean, right now it's Conor McGregor. There's no question he's the biggest star. But as far as this dominance and that sort of thing, yeah, you're right. We're kind of in between long-standing champions right now, right?
Yeah, and so Conor, I feel like when people really compare, like if you're just a new combat sports fan or a UFC fan, a lot of people just think of Conor as this megastar, and they think of Floyd because they fought together. And it's apples and oranges. Floyd's 50-0. Boxing's a little bit different than MMA. MMA, you're going to lose. Like there's like two people who haven't lost, and that's Jon Jones and it's a disqualification and Khabib. Other than that, everyone's really lost. So with Conor, I knew it was going to happen as a matter of time. It was just a matter of time. But how many losses can he suffer before he loses that fan base that he's really gained? Not necessarily losing. He'll always be a star. He'll always have that following, but he's starting to lose that little bit of swagger or the people that followed him because of that Floyd fight.
Yeah, I'd say he probably has two chances left, right? You know what I mean? Like you lose to Dustin Poirier again. You can probably sell the narrative. Wow, this guy just had his number. You know what I mean? That Dustin Poirier. I mean, who doesn't like Dustin Poirier? The more you get to know him, the more you find out what a great dude he is, and he's a fantastic fighter. But I think you could probably sell that narrative. They're like, well, that's just Dustin Poirier, man. He ran into the wrong guy at the wrong time. They fought very quickly, and he just wasn't able to do it. That's the right guy. And then you get matched up with somebody fresh, whoever that is. You lose that one. Then all of a sudden you're in a position where it's like, well, what are we selling anymore? You know what I mean? Of course, at that point you can always try to sell the comeback story. You know what I mean? So there's always angles about it. I mean, yeah. But yeah, I think Conor is in need of a win pretty soon if he wants to keep remaining this massive global superstar that people are willing to tune in for no matter who he's fighting.
Right, and I agree. John Morgan from MMA Junkie, it is always a pleasure. Thank you for allowing me to pick your brain. I know you have a busy schedule. So for those listening, where can they follow you, read some of your work? What do you have coming up? The floor is yours.
Yeah. Obviously, follow me at MMA Junkie. All the work is there. But you can hit me up on Twitter at MMA Junkie John or on Instagram at Jon Morgan MMA. And like I said, podcast is the MMA Road Show every single week. And tune in to UFC Fight Pass this weekend. See me and CM Punk calling Cage Fury Fighting Championships.
I will be tuned in. John, thank you for coming on. And until next time, you're always welcome to come on the show. We'll talk soon.
For sure.